Paul Ryan, gave a town hall-style presentation today in Pere, Wisconsin, on a busy news day.
Hey everybody! Go Packers. Please, everybody have a seat. I can see that you have seats. I don't want to make you stand the whole time. And I want to begin, unfortunately, on a somber note. We woke up to some pretty disturbing news this morning. I know all Americans today are shocked and saddened by the news from the Middle East. The attacks on our diplomatic missions in Egypt and Libya, and the loss of 4 American lives, including our ambassador, J. Christopher Stevens. This is outrageous. Our hearts are heavy, and our thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families. And I would just like to ask at this moment that we join together in a moment of silence in memory of them. Thank you. This is a time for healing. It's a time for resolve. In the face of such a tragedy, we're reminded that the world needs American leadership. And the best guarantee of peace is American strength. We face a big decision in this country. The decisions we make are profound, and they will last not just for 4 years, but for a generation. And the decisions and the challenges we face are not just right here at home, but abroad. And so in that spirit, I want to have a town hall meeting where we listen to you. I've had over 500 town hall meetings right here in Wisconsin. And what I've learned as a representative of Wisconsin is that to be a good representative, to be an effective leader, you have to know what's going through people's lives. You have to understand their plights and their concerns. That, to me, is what matters most. Mitt Romney and I understand what's going on in this economy. We understand the challenges that we're facing. We understand that we can do a lot better than this. When, as Scott mentioned, you have 23 million people in this country, that's 23 million men and women who are struggling to find work, who are either working in a field they never trained for, below their skill sets, or a temporary job, or a lot of people just gave up looking for work. Last month alone, for everybody who found a job in America, nearly 4 people stopped looking for one. That is not an economic recovery. This is not what an economic recovery looks like. Look at our poverty rates. Look at the fiscal cliff that is giving so much uncertainty to businesses. We can do better than this. And we are at that proverbial fork in the road. And what we have now learned almost 4 years into this presidency, that President Obama is putting us on the wrong track. He said lots of great things that were very hopeful and very comforting in all of our hometowns in 2008. Unfortunately, the actions and the deeds didn't follow the hope and the change in the words. But fortunately, it's not too late to get this right. It's not too late to get the country back on track by reclaiming those principles that built this country, that gets America free, that gets our economy growing, that get people hope, that get people back to work, that get us back to prosperity and jobs and opportunity. All the more reason. The ugly reminders this morning by turning on our TV and seeing what's going on around the world. All the more reason why we need leadership. That is why I'm so proud to stand with a man like Mitt Romney. This is a man who, when you look at the living example that he has placed in his life, a man of charity, a man of faith, a man of integrity, a man of accomplishment, a man of skill and experience, turning around the Olympics when his country called, starting businesses, turning around failing businesses, creating tens of thousands of jobs. I'm proud to stand with a guy who knows that if you have a small business, you built that business. It's really important. And of all the time when we need executive decision making, when we don't need any more finger pointing or blaming others or preying on the darker emotions like envy and fear and anxiety, we need leadership. When this man was governor of Massachusetts, unemployment went down, family household income went up. He presided over an increase of the credit rating of his state. Under President Obama, we've had unemployment above 8% for 43 months. Family household income on average has gone down $4,000. And we've had the first downgrade of the United States credit in our history, and another one is threatening to come. That's not leadership. And so what I would like to do is just have a conversation. I want to hear from you. Get your feedback, get your opinions, get your questions, and let's just have a good conversation, because that is how Americans fix things. We talk to each other, we understand each other, and therefore that is what representative government is all about. And I just want to punctuate it with this. There are a lot of principles that built this country. Freedom, free enterprise, liberty, self-determination. But one that is tantamount, one that is imperative. The government works for us and not the other way around. Government by consent of the governed is a driving principle that we will restore in this country. So let's get on with it and let's have a conversation. Now they've got folks who have microphones, so please just wait. I wanted to see a show of hands. And they have folks with, how about the guy in the white shirt over here? And we'll just bounce all the way around.
Paul, I want to thank you for becoming, accepting being vice president. That's about the best thing that could have ever happened to America.
Thanks. Good to see you.
And I know how hard you work, and I've seen it many years. So, my question is this. Whenever I talk to Democrats, they say our problems are Congress. I want you to explain to the American people how the Senate keeps the same budget for 3 years. It's about the money. It's the Democrats wanting to keep the money. And the fact that they do not do anything in the Senate is who we should really be blaming.
So, no, what he's talking about is we have a fiscal crisis. I think everybody knows that. You can't keep borrowing and spending money we don't have. When government, on average, has spent or borrowed about 40 cents of every dollar we spend, we're heading toward a debt crisis. It's the most predictable economic crisis we've ever had. Here's the way I look at it, to punctuate your point. I remember 2008 and the economic crisis that ensued like it was yesterday. I remember the Treasury Secretary and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve coming to Congress hyperventilating about a possible crash and Great Depression. We remember that thing caught us by surprise. Now that we look back on it, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the housing bubble, and we can look back at all the Wall Street stuff, but that crisis caught us by surprise. Here's the way I would ask the question. What if, knowing it was coming, what if your president, your senator, or your congressman saw that economic crisis coming, where trillions of dollars of wealth from retirees was vanished, millions of people sent out of work still to this day because of it? What if your elected representatives saw it coming? What if they knew it was going to happen? What if they knew why it was going to happen? What if they knew what they needed to do to prevent it from happening, and they had the time to do it, but they decided it just wasn't good politics? They decided not to do it because it just wasn't good for their political futures. What would you think of them? That's exactly where we are today. We see this coming. We see a debt crisis on our horizon. We know that if you follow what Europe is doing, you'll get the same results. And here's the bitter problem. They call it austerity. What it means in Europe is current seniors are seeing their retirement and health benefits slashed. They're cranking up their taxes, and young people coming out of school in Europe have no opportunities. They're entering another recession. Politicians, and in this case both political parties, politicians have been making empty promises to voters to get reelected all over the world and in America. And pretty soon, those empty promises become broken promises if it becomes a crisis or a debt crisis. Our job, our moral imperative, our obligation to you, our fellow citizens, is to prevent that from happening. What we want to do is stop a debt crisis, get economic growth and opportunity revived in this country, and make sure that the promises that are made to my mom, Betty, who's over here, who's been on Medicare for over 10 years, I won't tell you exactly how many years, more than 10 years. But people were made promises. They based their retirements on these promises. It's our first priority to make sure the government can keep those promises. But if we have a debt crisis, then that may not be the case. And so our job is to make sure that we can keep the promises that have been made to people. And those of us who are younger, who know these programs will not be there based on where we're going now, we need to reform them for the next generation so that we can bank on them. And the problem is, there is a fundamental lack of leadership in Washington on this. Now, the House of Representatives, we've led and passed 2 budgets that fix this problem, that get us on a path to balancing the budget, that pay off the debt, that grow the economy, that keep the promise of Medicare and those programs for our current seniors. The President has had 4 chances to fix this. 4 budgets he sent to Congress, none of which bothered to even try to fix this problem. $1 trillion deficits each time. Debt getting out of control. Never, ever balancing the budget. And what's even worse is that his allies in the Senate, even though we have a law that tells us you have to pass a budget every year. You see, April 15th is tax day for all Americans. It's also budget day for Congress. We have a law that says, got to pass a budget by April 15th. And the Senate hasn't done it for 3 years. They have simply chosen not to lead and not to bother passing a budget. So we're still living under the 2009 Obama budget. Remember what we got from there. That's a fundamental lack of leadership. Mitt Romney is not going to make that mistake. When Mitt Romney asked me to join the ticket, we had a long conversation. He told me about his family and his principles, told me about his upbringing and his life and how he has a sense of obligation and duty. And then he told me about how he sees this country at a very precarious moment in history, at a very dangerous fork in the road, but if we get it right, we'll be okay. And he said, you have the kind of experience as a reformer from taking on these big problems, this fiscal crisis, this budget crisis. You have the experience that complements mine. Join me, and I want to fix this fiscal mess in Washington. I'm not going to point fingers at other people. I want to take this on, get this done, get this economy growing so that we can dodge this bullet that is now getting and engulfing Europe. That's the kind of leadership we need. That's why we need a real leadership. Anybody here? How about the gentleman right here? What's on your hat? I can't see it. I didn't see it. Oh, I thought that you're a Bronze Star winner. Thank you very much for your service to our country, sir. Thank you. The Bronze Star recipient. That's a very special thing.
The current administration seems to have more time to play golf than listen to their national security briefings. The president has more time to prepare for a comedy show than he does to meet the ambassador or the administration of Israel when they're in country. Our embassy, our ambassador has been slaughtered, and his part of his staff has been slaughtered, and 2 embassies overrun this morning. How would the Mitney Ryan administration do things different?
First of all, peace through strength works. That is it is very important that a president speak with a singular voice representing our principles and our values. We don't want people around the world wondering what our values are. We believe in individual rights, and particularly in the Middle East, we believe in women's rights. That's very important. We believe in plurality, tolerance, religious freedom. So it's important that people know who we are and what we believe in and the values we're going to stand up for. That's point number 1. But point number 2, if you show weakness, if you show moral equivocation, then foreign policy adventurism among our adversaries will increase. We do not want a world climate where our adversaries are so tempted to test us and our allies are worried about trusting us. And that is unfortunately the path that we are on right now, and I really worry about that. This is my 14th year serving in Congress. That means I started before 9/11. That means I've been involved in seeing what we've done. We have sent so many Wisconsinites to battle who volunteered, who said, sign me up, I believe in my country. And what we must do, this is really critical. This is a priority I've made just in writing the budgets for our federal government, for our national defense, for our veterans. Our veterans have been made promises. Our veterans' health care is critical. We have a new CBOC, that's been here, community-based outpatient clinic in Green Bay. We put them down in southern Wisconsin. It's very important that we keep the commitments to our veterans so that they know we have their back, because right now they're out there getting our back. That is really important. The last point I'd say is I believe that the president's devastating defense cuts breed weakness. The president sent us a whole new round of defense cuts in his budget this year. It's really the only area where he seems willing to net cut spending is in our military. He's not cutting spending in all these other areas but our military. And then you have this thing, I won't get into the policy wonkery of it, the sequester, but you have another looming $500 billion cut to defense on top of $478 billion, which the Secretary of Defense, a good man named Leon Panetta, says is devastating. The president hasn't lifted a finger to prevent that. We passed a bill in the House to prevent it. Because you know what? There's a lot of room to cut government spending around government, but it should not come at the expense of our fighting men and women in our military who are out there defending us. We need to make sure that they have the equipment they need. We need to make sure that they have the benefits that they were promised. And we had to make sure that when we send them out to battle for us, that they have everything they need to make them safe, that they have all the people that they need to make them safe. That is crucial. We're familiar with it here in Wisconsin. Look, we've got the littoral combat shits up at Marinette. Oshkosh is producing all of these great vehicles that are keeping our men and women safe. So these devastating defense cuts, they not only shortchange our troops, they not only make it harder for us to make them safe and complete their mission, but they send a signal to our adversaries in the world that we're retreating, that we're weakening. That's a temptation that many can't resist. Peace through strength works, and a Romney administration will embrace the peace through strength doctrine. Maybe back here. How about it? Is there a mic over here? Is there a microphone person over here? I can't. Okay, we'll get a microphone person over here, and then I'll say, yeah, no, don't worry, buddy. I just want to make sure you can get it. Do you have a mic? Here comes somebody. The tall guy in the blue and white shirt. With the chops. Yeah, looks good, man. Yeah, just...
Back in 2008, Obama made a lot of grandiose fiscal promises to fix the problems. And you're making very large promises yourselves. However, he never gave a deadline for any of the fiscal promises. Do you have a deadline? Because I don't want to spend 8 years on another risk.
That's right. The answer is yes. And it's called a budget. We're going to have one, we're going to pass it, and we're going to do it on time because there's an actual deadline in law. That's what we're doing. Mitt Romney has already put out more details, more solutions on how to get this economy turned around, and how to get this debt and deficit under control than this sitting president of the United States has. Now, we put it right out there on paper. We've said, here is our solution. See, it's not just enough for us to criticize the present administration. There's plenty of room for that. But we owe you solutions. We owe you specifics. The Romney-Ryan 5-point plan for a stronger middle class is very specific. These are ideas that are proven to get this economy growing. And what's central among that is to get this deficit under control, because that is hurting you right now. This cloud of debt produces so much uncertainty on everything, because you have no idea what tax rates will be in the future or interest rates will be in the future if your government keeps going on this unsustainable path. And so the answer to your question is, a deadline is the budget deadline. We've passed it twice through the House. Mitt Romney has got a specific plan to deal with it. I'll give you the quick Cliff Notes version. Number one, we have got a lot of energy in this country. Let's use the energy we have in this country, and that creates jobs. That creates prosperity. You know, we can start by day one by approving the Keystone Pipeline to make sure that that oil in Canada comes to America, doesn't go to China, and that creates jobs right there. Coal, gas, oil, nuclear, all of the above, renewables. Number two, this to me is really important for the Midwest, for where we come from, for Janesville, for Kenosha. We've lost a lot of jobs. A lot of people in our communities, personal friends of mine, people I went to high school with, people I grew up with, people, you know, I worked out at the Y with. They thought they'd had the same job for most of their lives, just like their parents did. In GM, in Janesville, that was the basic belief that you can come out of high school, you can have a really good job that makes a great living for yourself and your family. Because that was what it was like for at least a generation. Same goes for Kenosha and others. Problem is, when those jobs go, the people who lose their jobs in these industries don't have another job that makes up for the same lost income they had. So what do you do about it? Well, we've got great technical colleges here. We have a great UW system that Scott Walker's improving on and making better. Let's have job training skills that can actually go to the people who lose those jobs so they can go back and get the training and the skills they need to get a job in the 21st century. There are so many duplicative programs in Washington that need consolidating so they can go to the actual individual out of work. My worry is people who are in the mid-stage of their careers, people who are in their 30s or 40s or 50s, who are out looking for work, or who just gave up trying. My worry is that they'll start giving up on life, on making their own opportunity to what they want to be. This is a critical moment. This is why you need economic growth. And this is why you need to have the ability, the means, to go to Black Hawk Tech, to go to MATC, to go to any one of our community colleges or universities so they can get the skills they need so they can get back in the pipeline of opportunity. And why you need economic growth that creates these jobs and the demand for these work, that is critical. Number three, we make a lot of stuff here. There are more jobs per capita in manufacturing in Wisconsin than any other state in the country. We make things in Wisconsin. We're really proud of it. We also grow a lot of things. We grow a lot of food. Down in our area, down in the south, we had a pretty bad drought. It wasn't so bad up here, but you know, our corn and bean crops, not like it usually is. But what we need to do is open foreign markets for our manufacturing goods, for our food, so that we can sell more. When 95% of the world's population is overseas, we need to open those markets. And when other countries cheat, when other countries like China steal our intellectual property and cheat, we need to call them to the carpet on it. We need to make sure that they treat us fairly and equally, because if we're on a level playing field, we will create jobs. We will have fair trade that gets us promoting things. Now, the other thing is you've got to get spending under control. By actually having and passing a budget, which is just the fundamental obligation of leadership, it's the statutory obligation of Congress and the President, and it's the moral obligation that we get this thing under control so we don't have a European debt crisis. That means we've got to cut spending. That means we have to reform these entitlement programs so we can keep the promise to those in or near retirement and make sure that our generation has this when we retire. Now, when we do this, we remove all that uncertainty. If you take a look at what President Obama is promising, look at the failed leadership that he's offered. He's promising that this January we have a massive tax increase. Now, what President Obama would like you to think is that this is just a tax increase on Aaron Rodgers, or a tax increase on Prince Fielder, or some Wall Street tycoon or movie star. Here's the problem. It's a huge tax increase on our successful small businesses. 9 out of 10 businesses in Wisconsin, 90% of our businesses, they file their taxes as individual people. And so what the president is promising is this January, their top tax rate goes above 40% federally. You throw the Wisconsin income tax on top of that, we're taxing these businesses more than 50%. Overseas, which is just above Lake Superior there, other countries are lowering their tax rates. It's close. Look, we compete with Canada. It's healthy competition. But here's the issue. Canada, like so many other countries around the world with which we compete, lowered their tax rates on their businesses. Last January, they lowered their tax rate to 15% on their businesses. And President Obama is promising that our successful small businesses, drive around any one of our towns, you'll see an industrial park. And in that industrial park will be lots of businesses that have 5, 25, 50, 150 people working at that business. 9 out of 10 of them pay their taxes as individuals. And he says that their top tax rate's going above 40% when the Canadians are at 15%. You see, when we tax our job creators a lot higher and more than our foreign competitors tax theirs, they win, we lose. We can't have that. What's worse is all these tax increases just go for more spending. Add up every one of the president's promised tax increases. They don't even pay for a fifth of his proposed deficit spending. This idea of taking more from businesses and families to spend in Washington doesn't work. That is what we're going to do. That is the Romney plan for a stronger middle class. Champion small businesses. Get this deficit in spending under control. Make sure that our trading competitors are fair and that we can open up markets for our products to be made here and sold there. Get people the skills they need when they're in the middle of life and they've been knocked out and they're down on their luck. And make sure that with all this oil and gas, with all this new technology, don't put the federal government in front of it. Get the federal government behind it so we can create these jobs. That, to us, is what will get us prosperity and economic growth and opportunity. Anybody over here? How about the guy in the jacket right there?
My name is Bob Pointer. My daughter says you're a pretty good guy, by the way.
Yeah. Say thanks to her.
Yeah, I got a question on federal agencies. Seems like every day we wake up to a news story about federal agencies going off to Hawaii trips or going to Las Vegas. Or my question is twofold. What would you do? How would you trim federal government, some number of these agencies? And then the ones, hopefully, that would remain, how would you get them under control and stop wasting our money?
It's a very good question. I'm going to be talking to a young woman from Appleton shortly after this who's been talking about this issue for a long time. Her name's Greta Van Susteren. You ever heard of her? Yeah. She's focused on this like a laser beam. A couple of things. Number one, don't keep rubber stamping spending increases to all these government agencies. They have an automatic spending increase built into their budgets, no questions asked. That's got to be taken away. Number two, we just have to cut spending on federal agencies. I just got to tell you, the kind of increases they've gotten over the last 4 years. Don't forget that President Obama and his party controlled all of government the first 2 years of his administration. And so domestic government bureaucracies got on average a 24% increase just in those first 2 years. Did you get a 24% increase in your take-home pay, in your paycheck, in your family budget, small business revenues? So the federal government's running out in front of the taxpayer. And when they waste money like this, because you keep giving them all these increases, number one, you got to cut spending. I mean, just literally, that forces people to become more efficient. But you need a management makeover of federal agencies and the federal government. Of all the people who have aspired to be the President of the United States, I literally cannot think of a better man than Mitt Romney to take on this challenge, because this is exactly what he excels at doing. turning around big organizations and making them more lean, mean, and efficient, you have to have the right incentive structures so that federal agencies aren't just trying to pad their budgets. They're looking for ways to cut their budgets. You need to incentivize that. And the Mitt Romney test is this. Is this worth borrowing more money from China to finance? If it's not, don't do it. So that's the other problem we have. There are a lot of good management reforms that have not been tested yet, that get the federal bureaucracy in sync with the taxpayer. Because right now, I would argue it's the opposite. OPM, Charlie Sykes says this all the time, other people's money. When you have bureaucracies spending other people's money like it's monopoly money, they don't think about it as if it's their money. We need to reform the management system of the federal government, of the way our agencies spend and the way they operate, so that A, we can see the books, B, we can compare them, and C, we measure them based on how much more efficient they've become, how much they've done more with less than simply just rubber stamping big increases in their budget so they can do more with more borrowed money. And so to me, it's about the culture of how these government agencies are run. It's about how Congress funds these agencies. You know, what happens in Congress is you spend all your time spending money. We don't spend our time overseeing how that money is being spent. You know, you go through a budget cycle in a season, spend, then you start over next year, and you just start spending again. We've got to have more oversight. We've got to have more oversight by the president and his cabinet, by the administration, and by Congress, because it is hardworking taxpayers who are paying for all of this. And unfortunately, it's not just this generation of hardworking taxpayers. It's the next generation of hardworking taxpayers, because this debt is literally getting out of control. How about the guy in the sunglasses there?
Bill Rank, brilliant. In '08, we had a fella that snuck into the White House that said he's going to be very transparent. And how, when you get to the White House, how transparent are you going to be?
What is that, a Shimano? I can't read. Oh, sorry, I don't want to read it. Yeah. I was just trying to read the logo. I'm a big fisherman, so I couldn't tell. This is critical. Here's the problem. When people go out there and say they're going to do all these things and then they don't do it. You break the covenant with the people that got you elected in the first place. I mean, look at all the broken promises we've heard from President Obama to date. He was going to cut the deficit in half in 4 years. Nowhere close. If we just passed the stimulus legislation, unemployment would never get above 8%. It's been above 8% for 43 months. And so transparency obviously is key, but what we want to do is open the books to the federal government. The Pentagon hasn't even been able to pass an audit. That's ridiculous. So to me, you need to have the kind of management reforms we were talking about so that you have total transparency, so that the taxpayer themselves can see where dollars are going. And the other problem we have is we have so much redundant programs. The problem with Washington is you just keep adding new program after new program, and you don't even measure to see if they're working. We're talking about job training. We have over 40 different job training programs spread across more than a half dozen agencies in the federal government. We don't even measure whether they work very well or not, whether they're even going to the person who needs a job and they're getting placed in it. Let's consolidate these things, put them into career scholarships so that we can actually get the support to the people who need it and have a measurement system so we can see whether they're working or not. That's part of the problem. Every president comes in with all of these kinds of promises, but the results aren't there. And here's the problem. When we keep spending money we don't have, when we're borrowing at the kind of clip we're borrowing at, we're going to have a debt crisis. And so the urgency of the moment is yesterday. And the key is this. If you know where your taxpayer dollars are going, if you can actually see what's happening in government, then you are more likely to hold your congressman and your president and your senator more accountable for your money that they are spending and your children's money that they are borrowing. That to me is very important. And it means budget. Again, I hate to keep sounding like a broken record, but you need to pass a budget and then hold your elected accountable for implementing their budget. Our government has been running on autopilot for 3 years. And if you have autopilot government, you do not have accountable government. You don't have transparent government. You've got to say, here's how much we're going to spend on this program. Here's what we can afford. Here are our priorities. And then implement it. That's not what we've had. President Obama came in, one-party control, passed nearly every item on his agenda, including his big budget at the time, and look where we are right now. Autopilot government ever since then. And we hear, every new day, some breaking news about how some bureaucrat wasted money, how they went to Vegas. Yeah, I saw the picture of the guy in the bathtub in Vegas and all of that. I mean, you watch Greta and you can get all this stuff. Yeah. The point is, you got to stop the OPM mindset. It's not other people's money. It's hardworking taxpayer dollars. We're the stewards of them, and you ought to see where your money goes. And your elected representatives should follow the law and actually budget. And if you don't like the budget they pass, then hold them accountable. But at least they ought to pass a budget. And that, to me, is the first line of accountability when it comes to your taxpayer dollars. Two more? Do we have mics over here? How about the guy right there in the red? Wait for the mic. He's going to come to you.
Congratulations on accepting the nomination. I have a question concerning the Federal Reserve. What can Mitt Romney do, and what can Paul Ryan do to stop QE1, stop QE2, stop devaluing our dollar?
Well, I hate to say it, but QE1 and quantitative easing, what this means is the federal government creating money and buying our own bonds, which dilutes our currency at the end of the day. Now, I can go into a technical observation, but what it is this is our Federal Reserve, our central bank, trying to make up for failed fiscal policy. They're trying to bail out the fact that the president hasn't led, that the Senate hasn't passed a budget, that we have horrible economic policy coming from our regulations and from our tax policy, and so they're trying to bail it out, and that's not the job of the Federal Reserve, in my opinion. And so QE1 and QE2 are kind of gone. Those are already done. Now they're talking, actually today and tomorrow, they call it the Federal Open Market Committee. The Federal Reserve is meeting today, and they're going to be discussing whether they do more of this money creation. And what it is the federal government is creating money on one hand to buy the bonds that are being issued by the Treasury on the other hand to try and keep interest rates low. Interest rates are exceptionally low. They've been low for a long time. And Mitt and I believe that this will, in the end, do more harm than good. That the benefits of all this money creation and quantitative easing are overweighed by the cost of doing so. Here is what is essential for the Federal Reserve for our monetary policy. 2 words: sound money. We need sound money. We need to know that our currency is going to be a reliable store of value, that the dollars you have in your pockets will buy a dollar's worth of good tomorrow and 10 years from tomorrow. And when the federal government and the Federal Reserve engages on these kinds of policies, they have to be mindful of making sure that our prices are stable. There are a lot of things the government can do to hurt people. One of the insidious things government can do is to debase our own currency. Because if we have an inflation problem, we don't have it right now, but the fear with this kind of monetary policy is down the road, we'll lose credibility under our currency. We'll have inflation down the road. And here's what happens when that happens. You lose your purchasing power. If you're living on a fixed income, if you retire, I just talked to a couple of retired teachers who retired in the Milwaukee suburbs, one in Hales Corners and one in Franklin. And they retired up in Sturgeon Bay. Now, my guess is when they set the retirement up, they had a fixed income that they based their living standard on. They have a budget. They're in their golden years enjoying life. Now, here's what happens when you have inflation. Here's what happens if your government mismanages the management of your currency. This inflation wipes out your living standard. The dollars you base your retirement on don't buy as much as you thought they would when you base your retirement on them. That is something that the government, and only the government, can do. And so it has to do it well. And so you need to make sure that our federal government, the one agency of government in charge of our currency, the Federal Reserve, has to mind price stability. And their goal is to make sure that our currency is stable, because a necessary precondition for economic growth in order for the economy to grow, in order for people to take risks, in order for people to look at that investment horizon and wondering whether they're going to start a business, they need to know that their money is still going to be good. They need to know that the price is still going to be there. I just talked to a woman who makes, she takes cherries from Door County, jalapenos, and makes this really great jam, this really great jelly. You know what I'm talking about, Franz? She is looking to start. Yeah, she's looking to start her business back up. But if you're gonna take risks, if you're gonna buy, a kitchen and start doing all of this, you need to know that you can sell your good at a price where you can recoup your costs and your profit. You're not going to take all this risk unless you know that it's a risk worth taking. And if your currency is undermined, if your government keeps borrowing, if your government keeps printing, if your government keeps regulating like it is, that's a huge cloud of risk. And so I would say that one of the worst things hitting our economy today is uncertainty. Massive tax increases looming on the horizon. Huge defense cuts. Marinette, Oshkosh, and others looming right on our horizon in January. And then you have the Federal Reserve, which is, I believe, doing more harm than good if they enter into quantitative easing round 3. That produces more uncertainty. The markets are uncertain. It might show a positive effect in the near term, but not in the long term, I fear. And so what we want is a monetary policy where the goal of the Federal Reserve is to focus on sound money, on price stability, making sure that inflation doesn't get out of control. Because if the Fed takes their eye off that ball, then we could have the worst of both worlds. They call it stagflation, high unemployment and inflation. Remember the Jimmy Carter years? We don't want to repeat the Jimmy Carter years. That means we got to get our fiscal house in order, our monetary house in order, our regulatory house in order, and get behind the entrepreneur and the small businesses so that they can create jobs and that they have the certainty they need to do that. One more? Show of hands. I'm looking for any young ladies. How about this lady right here? Yeah, you got with the what is that? A stopwatch or a?
No,
Yeah.
it's a gift from my daughter.
Oh, it's cool. I can't see too well. It looks nice.
Okay,
Very elaborate stopwatch.
I have a non-money question. There's a doctor that is rotting in a Pakistani jail right now, Dr. Shakil Afridi, I think his name is. Thank you. It breaks my heart to think this guy risked his life for us, and he's rotting in a jail right now. This is wrong. What can you do?
Yeah, this is the doctor that was doing DNA samples for testing to try and find DNA strands from the Bin Laden family to help us, nail down that Osama Bin Laden was in Abbottabad in this compound.
Right.
Let me be careful in my words, but be really clear. These leaks on national security coming from the White House undermine the men and women who put risks on their lives for us. This is not helpful. I suppose it could have served some short-term political gain, could have told some nice story. But let's ask this question. If you're a doctor in Pakistan and the American government asks you to help in the future and you see that, what do you think you're going to do? How are we going to get people to help us in the war on terror if this is how we treat our allies in the war on terror? These leaks are not helpful. They're counterproductive. And so again, a Romney administration will not make those kinds of mistakes, because a Romney administration believes so strongly in peace through strength, in supporting our allies, and we've got really tough times ahead of us. Look at what's going on with Israel and Iran right now. Look at the danger that threatens not just us, but the world and peace. And if we're going to try and advance our national security interests and enlist people in very difficult corners of this world to help us, we keep leaking about what they're doing, they're going to stop helping us in doing it. So this, to me, is tantamount in this war on terror. And so let's just remember, there are a lot of people who put their lives on the line for us. There are a lot of people who are not from this country who believe in this country, who believe that a strong America is the best thing for their peace and security because we stand for democracy and freedom. We stand for the values of free enterprise, individual rights, women's rights. They want to see us succeed. They want to see us talk confidently in our values because they know that if America stops doing that, they're going to have less support for their freedom. That, to me, is critical. And it's just a shame that this man is, as you say, rotting in jail. We've got to treat our allies better than this, and we'll do that. Thank you, everybody. They're telling me that's the last one I have time to do. Thanks so much for coming out, everybody.